Have you ever wondered why dreams feel so real while you are dreaming? Why you laugh, suffer, run, love in a dream, and only afterward realize that it was all just a dream? And now be honest, don't you sometimes feel exactly this way even when you are awake? Moments when the world seems strangely familiar, as if you are standing in the midst of a story that holds more significance than it reveals at first glance. Have you ever seen The Matrix or Avatar and felt that they are not just films, but metaphors for something deeper? This idea that reality is not the foundation, but merely a layer. That consciousness does not reside in the body, but rather the body appears within consciousness. Perhaps you have experienced it, moments when everything is clear, when time stands still, when you are completely present, and at the same time feel that this world is not the ultimate reality. What if reality truly functions like a dream, stable, logical, consistent, but not final? And what if you are not here simply to exist, but to consciously participate? Write to me in the comments. Have you ever felt that this world feels like a dream? Or do you see parallels between your dreams, films like The Matrix or Avatar, and your own life? Because perhaps awakening does not begin with leaving reality, but with consciously dreaming it. Every person knows this moment. You dream, and everything feels utterly real. You ask no questions. You doubt nothing. You are simply in it. Only when you wake up do you realize that was a dream. Yet while you experienced it, it did not feel like fantasy. It had logic, connection, emotion. It possessed an inner consistency that you only question afterward. And here begins a quiet, uncomfortable question. How do you know that what you now call waking state does not operate on the same principles? The dream does not deceive you because it is chaotic. It deceives you because it is stable enough, because it makes sense, because it feels like reality. And perhaps that is the crucial point. For we tend to believe that something must be true simply because it is consistent, because it is repeatable, because it has rules. Yet stability is not proof of truth. It is merely a sign of structure. A dream can be structured. A simulation can be structured. A realm of consciousness can be structured. The question is not whether something is stable, but at what level. In the dream, you accept things that would be absurd in the waking state. You can fly, time leaps, spaces change, identities merge, and yet everything feels normal as long as you are dreaming. Why? Because your consciousness within the dream has no point of comparison. It knows nothing else in that moment. Only through the shift of the level do you realize that was not the whole reality. And now imagine something even more uncomfortable. What if our waking consciousness is just another state, not wrong, but not final? What if reality is not absolute, but relative to the state of consciousness? Neuroscience reveals something astonishing to us. The brain constructs both the dream and the waking state from the same building blocks: non-perception, memory, expectation, emotion. The difference lies not in the material, but in the mode. In the waking state, the rules are stricter, the feedback is more stable, the environment reacts more consistently, but that does not necessarily make it more fundamental, only more enduring. Duration, however, is not a criterion for truth. A long dream remains a dream. Many people report dreams that felt more real than life itself, of lucid dreams in which they knew they were dreaming, and yet experienced them fully. What these experiences reveal is not that dreams are insignificant, rather, that reality operates in layers. There is not just real and unreal. There are levels of experience that permeate one another. And perhaps our everyday life is one of those levels. Look at how selective your perception is. You see only a tiny fraction of the electromagnetic spectrum. You hear only certain frequencies. You perceive time as linear, even though it is physically anything but clear-cut. What you call reality is already a massive reduction, a dream with fixed parameters, and yet you defend it as absolute because you know nothing else. Yet time and again, there are cracks in this certainty, moments when the world feels strange, too meaningful, too synchronous, too familiar, moments when you pause and think, this doesn't feel random. Such moments have been described by people for millennia, mystics, philosophers, poets, not as proof, but as hints. The dreamlike nature of reality does not mean that everything is meaningless. Quite the opposite. A dream is not worthless simply because it ends. Often, it is precisely for that reason that it is intense. If reality is dreamlike, it is not to devalue it, but to understand its depth. A dream is coherent, but not fixed. It is real in experience, but open in meaning, and that seems to apply to our world as well. It is stable enough to allow for relationships, learning, and development, but open enough to change through consciousness. This brings us to a crucial insight. Perhaps reality is not something that happens to us. Perhaps it is something that emerges while we experience it, not fully controlled, not arbitrary, but also not closed off, like a dream that unfolds as long as it is being dreamed. And perhaps you are not merely a figure in this dream. Perhaps you are also part of what dreams it. This idea may initially be unsettling, for it undermines our need for security, for firm answers, for a clear foundation. Yet it also opens up something else: wonder, humility, presence. If reality is dreamlike, then every moment is precious, not because it is absolute, but because it is transient. Then it matters not only what is objectively true, but how consciously you experience. Then attention becomes more important than control, depth more important than possession, awareness more important than certainty. And perhaps that is the quiet meaning behind this world. Not that we explain it, but that we experience it. Not that we wake up and leave, but that we learn to dream consciously. Yet if that is true, then a new question arises. Where does this dream even appear? What is the space in which reality, dream, body, and thoughts emerge equally? And this question leads us directly into the next chapter. For if reality is dreamlike, then it needs a stage. And this stage is not outside. It is consciousness. When reality behaves like a dream, a fundamental question arises. Where does this dream even appear? Everything you have ever experienced, every thought, every feeling, every memory, every perception has taken place in a single location. Not in space, not out there, but in consciousness. This is not a theory. It is a simple observation. Look now in this moment. Where do the words you are reading appear? Where does the feeling they evoke arise within you? Where is the image that forms inside you? Not on the screen, not in the brain as an object, but in perception. Consciousness is not a thing among things. It is the space in which things appear. Thoughts come and go. Feelings change. The body ages. The world moves. Yet that which perceives all of this remains remarkably constant. This perception has no form, no weight, no age. It is simply there, and precisely because of this it is overlooked. We are trained to pay attention to content, not to the space in which it appears. Just as one follows the film in a cinema and forgets that there is a screen. Yet without a screen, there would be no film. Consciousness is that screen, not in a metaphorical sense, in an experiential sense. Without consciousness, there would be no colors, no sounds, no time, no space. For space is nothing other than an arrangement of perceptions. Time is nothing other than the sequence of changes in experience. Without someone to distinguish, there is no here and there. Without someone to experience change, there is no before and after. This does not mean that the world does not exist. It means that existence without experience has no meaning. A universe without consciousness would be like a book that is never read. It may be printed, but its story does not exist as experience. Only through consciousness does information become meaning. Only through perception does structure become world. And here begins a radical reversal of our accustomed thinking. We are used to saying consciousness is in the world, yet from an experiential perspective it is exactly the opposite. The world is in consciousness, not as thought, as appearance. The body appears in consciousness. Space appears in consciousness. The idea of an outside appears in consciousness. This does not make consciousness a person, not you, but something more fundamental. It is the field in which everything becomes possible. Many try to localize consciousness in the brain, in neural processes, in chemical reactions, yet these are correlations, not explanations. One can see which brain activity corresponds with which experiences, but one does not find a place where experience itself is produced. It is as if you were searching for the singer in a radio. The radio alters the sound, it filters, it modulates, but it does not create the music. Perhaps the brain is not the origin of consciousness, but its receiver, an interface, a translator between a deeper field and a concrete experience. If this is true, then consciousness is not the result of the world, but its prerequisite. Then the universe unfolds not independently of you, but through you, not personally, not egocentrically, rather as a localized expression of a vast field. Just as a wave is not separate from the ocean, yet still possesses its own form. The universe would then be no object that you observe, but a process in which you participate, not as a spectator, as the very place where it happens. Every experience is a kind of concretization, a contraction of possibilities into a moment. Before perception, everything is open. After perception, something has occurred, not just out there, but within the field of experience itself. That is why reality does not feel neutral. It is always colored by mood, meaning, context. You do not see the same world when you are in love as when you are afraid. The objects may be the same, the world is not, because the world consists not only of things but of experience, and experience is always consciousness in motion. Perhaps this is precisely the conscious unfolding of the universe, not in the sense of a plan that is controlled from the outside, but in the sense of an inner process that experiences itself. The universe does not look at itself from the outside. It sees itself through perspectives, through you, through others, through every form of perception, not to achieve a goal, but to generate depth. For without experience, there would be no inner world, no meaning, no this is how it feels. Consciousness is the place where the universe gains an inner side, and perhaps this is the true beauty of this world, that it not only exists, but is experienced, that it does not merely unfold, but blossoms, not perfectly, not conclusively, but vibrantly alive. When you allow this, your role changes. You are no longer a small being in a vast, indifferent cosmos. You are a nexus, a focus, a place where the whole gathers, not to elevate you, but to deepen responsibility. For when reality appears in consciousness, the quality of your consciousness is not trivial. Mindfulness does not just change you, it alters the way the world appears, not absolutely, but noticeably. Perhaps this is why inner clarity often accompanies a sense of meaning, not because the world suddenly becomes different, but because it is seen differently. Consciousness is not an escape from reality. It is its origin, and if that is true, then the most important question is not what is out there, but who is experiencing all of this right now. This question inevitably leads us to the next chapter. For if consciousness is the stage, then what you call I is not the spectator in the audience. It is a character on the stage, and that is precisely what we will examine now. If reality resembles a dream, and consciousness is the stage upon which everything appears, then one question inevitably comes to the forefront. Who are you in this dream? Intuitively, you would say, I am the one who experiences. Yet upon closer inspection, this certainty begins to crumble. For the I with which you usually identify is itself something that appears. It is a thought, a feeling, a story. Just as a figure appears in a dream that is you, with a body, a name, a past, so too does a self-image arise in waking life that you call I. And just like in the dream, you take this figure to be the dreamer. But what if it is not? In the dream figure does not know that it is being dreamed. It acts, suffers, decides, hopes. It experiences a world that feels entirely real. Only upon awakening do you realize the figure was part of the dream, not its origin. The provocative question then becomes, what if your everyday I plays the same role? Not as a deception, but as a function. The self that you call I emerges from memory, language, bodily sensation, and social feedback. It is not a fixed core. It is a process. Even as a child, you learn to name yourself, to define yourself, to delineate yourself. This is me. This I like. This is not me. With each repetition, the story became more stable. With each affirmation, seemingly more real. Yet stability does not equate to substance. Identity is like a wave in the ocean. It has form, movement, continuity, but no water of its own. If you look closely, you will find no solid I behind the experiences, only experiences that arise and fade. Thoughts come, feelings come, decisions happen. But where is the unchanging observer? It is often assumed that the I is the observer. Yet even this feeling of observing is itself a perception. You can observe how you observe. This implies something radical. The observer is not separate from the observed. Both appear in the same field. There is no inner core that stands outside of experience and controls it. The self is not a conductor, it is part of the orchestra. This insight may initially feel unsettling, for we build our entire lives on the assumption of being someone specific, yet it is also liberating. If the I is a dream figure, then you are not reduced to it. You are not your role, not your story, not your past. You are that in which all of this arises. This does not mean that your personality is worthless. On the contrary, a dream figure is necessary for experience to take place. Without a figure, no play. Without a role, no story. Without identity, no learning. The problem does not arise from the existence of the self, but from the identification with it. When the figure believes it is everything, fear arises. Fear of loss, fear of insignificance, fear of an end. But when it is recognized that the figure is being experienced, not experiencing, something relaxes. You do not stop acting. You stop tensing up. Life continues to unfold, but it becomes more permeable. This permeability is the point at which many spiritual traditions begin, not to destroy the self, but to see through it. For a self that is seen through loses its weight, its absoluteness. It becomes what it has always been, a tool. The self organizes experience. It enables orientation. It makes communication possible. But it is not the dreamer. The dreamer is not a someone. He is not an object. He is not a center in space. The dreamer is consciousness itself, and consciousness has no identity. It takes on identities, just as an actor assumes roles, not to lose oneself, but to experience oneself. This also explains why identity changes over the course of life. Why earlier versions of you can feel foreign. You have not remained the same. But the experience has always been there. What remains is not the self-image, but the perception. And perhaps that is the common thread that runs through all states. Being awake, dreaming, deep presence, boundary experiences. There is always something there, something that is experienced, not tangible, not definable, but undeniable. When you recognize this, your relationship with yourself changes. You take thoughts more seriously, but not personally. You feel emotions more deeply, but you identify with them less. You do not become colder, you become freer. For the drama does not arise from experience, it arises from confusion. When the dream figure believes it must control everything, tension arises. When it realizes that it is part of a larger context, trust emerges. Not blind trust, a quiet one. Life then feels less like a struggle and more like a process, not always pleasant, but meaningful. And it is here that the deepest consequence of this insight reveals itself. When the observer and the observed are not separate, then the world is not out there. It is a relationship, an interplay. You do not see the world, you experience it. And this experience shapes what the world is for you, not willfully, not controlling, but resonantly. The self as a dream figure is therefore not an illusion to be overcome. It is an invitation to shift perspective, not from the dream to emptiness, but from identification to recognition. You are not the figure, but you are also not separate from it. You are the field in which it appears, and that is precisely what makes this world so remarkable. For it is not a rigid construct. It is a living dream, observing itself through many eyes. In the next chapter, we will look at what happens when this dream becomes conscious for a moment, when clarity arises without the dream ending. For perhaps awakening is not the end of the story. Perhaps it is the moment when the dream begins to recognize itself. There are moments that stand apart from all others, not loud, not spectacular, yet unmistakable. Moments when everything suddenly becomes clear, when thinking pauses, when time loses its sharpness, and you feel more present than usual, not transcendent, not absent, but deeper here. These moments cannot be forced. They come unexpectedly, between two thoughts, in a glance, in the silence after a sentence. And when they occur, they carry a strange quality within them. They feel more real than the rest, not because the world has changed, but because your relationship to it has changed. Some call these moments presence, others call it flow, still others grace, enlightenment, or awakening. The names are different, the experience is remarkably similar. In these moments, something falls away, not the world, not the body, but the constant inner commentary. Thinking becomes quieter, and an identification loosens. The I takes a step back, and suddenly everything expands. Many describe it this way. It's as if you are stepping out of an inner fog, not into another world, but into the same one, clearer. The colors seem more vibrant, sounds more present, movements more fluid. Yet the crucial element is not perception, it is the feeling of alignment, as if everything is exactly as it should be, without explanation, without judgment. These moments are not emotional in the usual sense. They are calm, clear, and profoundly simple, and that is precisely what makes them so powerful. For they reveal something that lies beyond thought. Consciousness recognizes itself, not as an idea, not as a concept, but as experience. In such moments, the question disappears, who am I? Not because it has been answered, but because it becomes irrelevant. There is only experience, without center, without boundary. Many people encounter such states in flow, when they are completely absorbed in an activity, while making music, while dancing, while writing, while engaging in sports. The I recedes and action unfolds. Others experience it in nature, gazing at the sky, by the sea, in the stillness of a forest, not because nature is magical, but because it demands less fragmented. Still others report such moments in peak experiences, near-death experiences, deep meditative states, mystical experiences. What all these situations have in common is not the trigger, but the effect. The familiar structure of the self dissolves, not completely, not permanently, but enough to reveal something deeper, and this deeper essence is not an object. It is not a being of light, no image, no thought. It is pure awareness, a state in which consciousness is not directed at something but recognizes itself, not reflecting, not analyzing, simply being. The paradox of it all. These moments do not feel foreign. They feel familiar, as if you are remembering, not something new, but something original. Many describe it with the same words. It should always be this way. It has always been this way. This is me, not as a personality, as a state. And it is precisely here that it becomes clear why one can speak of awakening in a dream. For the dream does not end. The world does not disappear, the body remains, but the perspective shifts, just like in a lucid dream. When you know you are dreaming and yet continue to dream, the difference is subtle but crucial. In a lucid dream, you are no longer at the mercy of it. You are present, awake in the dream. Translated to life, this means you recognize that reality is not absolute, but you do not flee from it. You stay, you act, you love, you suffer, but you do so with an inner space. This clarity is not permanent. It comes and goes, and that is precisely what matters. For awakening is not a final state. It is not a goal that one reaches and then possesses forever. It is a flash of light, a remembering, a falling back, and a reopening. Consciousness seems not to want to hold on to itself. It reveals itself and then withdraws, nigh and perhaps so that experience can continue. For if this clarity were to be permanent, the dream would lose its depth. There would be no more story, no development, no learning. That is why awakening does not destroy the dream. It refines it, it makes it permeable, lighter, less absolute. You take roles seriously, but not literally. You engage, but without tension. You know that you are playing, and yet you play. This attitude changes everything. Conflicts lose their finality. Successes lose their claim. Failure loses its sharpness. Not because nothing matters anymore, but because everything is embedded in a larger context. Awakening in the dream is not a retreat into the spiritual. It is a deepening of the everyday. You listen more closely. You react more slowly. You feel more deeply, not because you are better, but because you are more open. And perhaps that is precisely the purpose of these moments of clarity. Not to change you, but to remind you who you are beyond your roles. A consciousness that experiences, that meets itself, again and again. These moments are invitations, no commands, no promises. They do not say, stay here. They say, this is possible. And perhaps that is enough. For when you know that clarity is possible, your relationship to confusion changes. You identify less with it. You no longer see it as final. You know this too is part of the dream. And it is here that the next step opens up. For if awakening does not mean leaving the dream, but being consciously within it, then a new question arises. What happens when consciousness begins to act consciously within the dream? What if the universe is not only experienced through us, but learns through us? If reality resembles a dream, if consciousness is the stage and the self a dream figure, then the last great question fundamentally changes. No longer, how do I wake up and escape? But, how do I live consciously, right in the middle of the dream? For perhaps awakening is not a farewell to the world. Perhaps it is a new way to participate in it. In an ordinary dream, you are passive. Things simply happen. You react without choice, without distance. In the lucid dream, however, something new begins. You know that you are dreaming, and precisely because of that, your actions become significant. You can be more compassionate, freer, more creative, not because you control everything, but because you experience consciously. Translated to life, this means you stop viewing reality as something that happens to you, and you begin to see it as something that happens through you, not in a selfish sense, not as a creator fantasy, but as participation. The universe does not unfold despite you, but with you. Every experience you have is not a random episode, but a concrete expression of possibility, taking shape only through you. Not because you are special, but because every perspective is unique. When consciousness wants to experience itself, it needs difference, relationship, contrast. It needs closeness and distance, joy and pain, connection and separation, not as a mistake, as differentiation. Just as a thought only makes sense because there are other thoughts, meaning arises only in relation. And it is here that conscious unfolding begins. Yin, you are not here to have perfect experiences. You are here to have real experiences. Experiences that set something in motion, within you and thus in the whole. For when consciousness is the foundation, every inner movement is also a movement in the field, not measurable, not spectacular, but real. A decision made from clarity changes not only your life, it changes the quality with which experience unfolds, not through control, through resonance. Relationships are a key to this, for nowhere is it clearer that consciousness is not isolated. In the other, you encounter not just another person, but another perspective of the whole. Every conflict, every closeness, every wound is a friction point where consciousness sharpens itself. Not to be right, but to understand. When you begin to view relationships not just personally but consciously, their character changes. You ask less, what do I get? And more, what is revealed here? Not as a victim, not as a savior, but as a learner. Decisions also gain a new depth. Not every decision is right or wrong. Many are simply relevant to experience. They open certain paths and close others, not morally, structurally. Consciousness does not learn through avoidance, but through experiencing. This does not mean that everything must be tried, but it means that nothing is fundamentally meaningless. Even detours carry information. Even mistakes shape depth. Even failure is not empty. It leaves traces, not as guilt, as insight. Therefore, conscious unfolding means seeing responsibility not as a burden, but as participation. You are not responsible for everything that happens, but you are involved in the way it is experienced, and this way makes the difference. The same situation can be experienced as harsh and narrow, or open and learning, not because the situation is different, but because consciousness stands differently. This is not a spiritual trick. It is an attitude that does not arise from knowledge, but from presence. The more present you are, the less life unfolds automatically. The more it becomes a response to what is happening right now. The universe does not learn by gathering information. It learns by experiencing itself. And you are a place of this experiencing, not the only one, not the most important, but an indispensable one. Without you, this perspective would not exist, this combination of memories, feelings, body, history. This way joy is felt. This way pain is understood. That is not interchangeable. And perhaps that is the deepest meaning of individuality, not to separate from one another, but to enable diversity. Therefore, conscious unfolding does not mean detaching from the world, but connecting more deeply with it. Not clinging, but participating. Not losing, but opening. You do not live consciously by constantly reflecting. You live consciously by being present, in walking, in listening, in deciding, in doubting. Consciousness unfolds not in grand revelations, but in small, quiet shifts. a moment when you do not react immediately, a moment when you listen without judging, a moment when you do not judge yourself. And in all of this transforms the quality of the dream, not spectacularly, but sustainably. Perhaps this is the true invitation of this world, not to wake up and leave, but to remain awake while living, not to stand above the world, but to stand within it, without losing oneself in it. For if reality is a dream, then it is no mistake. It is a space of experience, and you are not here to end it. You are here to consciously live through it. Perhaps this is precisely the conscious unfolding of the universe within us, not as a goal, not as a plan, but as an ongoing process, moment by moment. If you have stayed with me this far, then you have not only listened, you have dreamt along. Perhaps not everything has felt logical. Perhaps questions have remained unanswered. Yet maybe there was that quiet moment of stillness in which you felt, something within me remembers. Take this feeling with you. Not as an answer, as an invitation. You need not believe anything. You need not hold on to anything. It is enough to be aware in this dream we call reality. If this video has touched you, then help expand this space of awakening. Leave a like, share it with those who may be searching without knowing it, and subscribe to this channel if you wish to delve deeper, not faster, but more honestly. For growth does not happen alone. It happens in connection, in resonance, from consciousness to consciousness. Thank you for being here. Thank you for feeling. Thank you for remembering. Perhaps reality is no mistake. Perhaps it is a dream that recognizes itself through us, spirit to spirit, your Zeitgeist.